Hello and welcome to Destination Draft Day. We got an action-packed Monday for you. If you're taking a break from the March Madness action, we appreciate you because the March Madness is here in the NFL Draft. Like Nick said last week, I'm sure a lot of your brackets are already busted. I predicted Texas to win last Friday's episode, and look at what happened there. So definitely a lot that has happened in terms of chaos. And if you just are hurt by the entire bracket side of March Madness, and come to us. We'll comfort you with some new hopefuls for the NFL Draft. But first and foremost, let's bring in Nick Durst. Nick, how are you doing?
Do well, Michael. We heard today, a few hours ago, that the NFL Draft will be taking place in Cleveland. So no more virtual. Going to be in person for at least the first round. There'll be some prospects there. Be interested to see how that goes. The last in-person draft, of course, was in Nashville, and it was packed. And the plan is for the 2022 draft to be in Las Vegas, which was the originally scheduled 2020 draft. What's your favorite part about watching the draft on TV? And what are you watching? Do you watch ABC, ESPN, or the NFL Network, or do you watch Bleacher Report?
I tend to go with wherever's really getting me the picks fastest. So, if that's ESPN, then I'm willing to watch ESPN. If that's NFL Network, I used to do that. I guess I recently haven't been able to get NFL Network just because of the TV subscriptions. We lowered our channel totals, so we're paying less. So mostly been sticking to ESPN. ABC was an option as well. But my most favorite thing about it is just all the chaos that happens. When we get past those first three picks that kind of go consensus, and we start to see those shockers on the board. The Denzel Ward going at 4, the Cleveland Farrell going at number 4, the QBs that are supposed to go top 5 falling to pick 11, maybe even pick 26. It's always super fun to see, and really it just kind of starts your predictions for the next season and allows you to really start to realize what this roster is going to look like when we enter that next year.
So what do you personally like better to watch, the draft or the Super Bowl?
As a Patriots fan, Patriots in the Super Bowl is number one. But if it's not the Patriots in the Super Bowl, it's real close, I got to admit.
Now, are you locked in for all 7 rounds? You'll watch every pick?
Absolutely. I hate that on TV broadcasts they start to do this thing where they don't talk about
the picks.
They just start talking about the past draft, and they'll go back and talk about like the first round QB.
Yeah. It's definitely tough to watch like late round 4 through 7 because just like the picks are caught up on the screen. They're not even talking about it.
Yeah. So if I have something going on, maybe I won't cancel out on plans. I'll just be looking at my phone the entire time, but for the most part, I stay at the TV. I'm watching it, and even if they're talking about something else, I just love to see the new names coming across the bottom.
Should be good. Rick, he says, let's go. And he loved the virtual draft. It was much more enjoyable for me, the home viewer. What did you think about the virtual draft?
I thought it was handled really well. I think there's something special about seeing those guys go on stage holding a team jersey for the first time, but definitely with the circumstances that were given, they did a really good job with the virtual draft.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. And then Rick wants everybody to join the NFL Draft Discord for rounds 4 to 7. Shoot the breeze with your team's fans. Maybe Michael will go live for rounds 4 through 7 that Saturday, right here on Destination Draft Day and Landry Football Network. How would you feel about that, Michael? You're breaking down the picks for 7 hours on a Saturday.
It's a possibility, but I probably don't want to tie myself up to it yet.
All right, we shall see. So that was interesting to note here. So Devontae Smith said he's not going to do any drills at Dallas Pro Day. He said his 2020 Heisman season spoke for itself. And then we saw that Caleb Farley from Virginia Tech, the quarterback, projected first-round pick, right, Michael? He's going to have some sort of back surgery. His agent, Drew Rosenhaus, who was, of course, Terrell Owens' agent, says he'll be ready to go for the beginning of training camp. But an injury at this stage of the game, Michael, how does that play out for most prospects?
Injuries like this are kind of big question marks, especially for, us as fans and the media. We don't really get any insider info unless we start getting sources and leaks about it. But really, it's all going to come down to team medicals. There's going to be teams that will probably look at this and maybe they take him off the board entirely and say, we're not risking that. And there's going to be teams that say, well, we agree. We think he'll be ready by training camp. We don't think it's going to have any influence on his long-term health. And we think he's going to be able to be a star corner for us. So it's really a toss in the air, and it's hard to really judge because we don't have info on the inside right now. So as far as we know, hopefully what Drew Rosenhaus is saying is correct, because he's definitely a talented corner. And, you never want to see anyone have their career derailed by injuries.
Yeah, definitely not. Other news, I remember like a few years ago, there was a cornerback who was suspended from the NFL from the Cardinals for betting on NFL games, but I guess now that sports betting is pretty legal, they don't care as much. He's reinstated, so we'll see if Josh Shaw gets signed by anybody. Probably not. Kyle Fuller, released by the Bears. We'll see who picks him up. Pretty talented.
Oh, he got signed like 30 minutes later. He's a Bronco now.
He's a Bronco, okay. And then Kenny Galladay signed with the Giants. So I think that's a huge waste of money. The guy's getting paid the same amount of money as Odell Beckham Jr., and there's no way you could tell me, Michael, that Galladay is as good as Odell Beckham Jr. Right. You can't tell me exactly. So we'll see how that works out.
Sign of the times.
And then now the big rumor is that Dory Jackson will be potentially a Giant, and Logan Ryan's recruiting him.
Yeah, and I think that's definitely a smart move for the Giants. They need that second corner next to Bradbury. If they can bring in an Adoree Jackson, it allows them to really open up their options in the NFL draft, and maybe they help out Daniel Jones even more, adding some talent to that offensive line.
Certainly. And then we see Philip Lindsay signed with the Texans, who also have Mark Ingram. Total mess there, but Lindsay's pretty good. Probably got a lot of carries. Chris Carson, who we talked about him last week, he re-signed with the Seahawks, so he's not going anywhere. Anthony Harris, who was the Vikings free agent, he went to the Eagles. So, people are moving here. Things are moving around here, and Desmond Trufant, he's with the Bears now to replace Kyle Fuller. Should be interesting. Basically, free agency is done here, but there's still a lot more stuff that could happen in the coming weeks. But I think now it's time to let Rockman rock, and he's gonna rock out here with what he does best: some mock drafts.
Absolutely. Let's talk about the Pittsburgh Steelers, a team that really kind of took some big hits in the free agency cycle, losing some very talented players. They were able to bring back Juju Smith-Schuster, only on a one-year deal, so they may be looking long-term at wide receiver, but immediate needs are going to be addressed first and foremost. Let's look at it. In the first round, I have him going Landon Dickerson, center out of Alabama, and I know that with the injury history, there's definitely question marks surrounding Dickerson, but in terms of interior offensive linemen, he is my center number one. I like him more than Creed Humphrey. I like him more than Josh Myers. And I think without the injury history, he would be a lock for the first round. Now, you have to couple in those medicals. If the Steelers give him a pass, I think they're getting a stud on the interior offensive line. And you look at needs in terms of just what is going to be hurting for this offensive line and for the Steelers team. And center is the big spot. Lost Pouncey due to retirement. Big Ben isn't the most mobile QB. You need someone that's going to be able to protect him. Dickerson is going to be there not only for Big Ben, but also just for the future of whoever is lining up at QB in Pittsburgh after this year. In the second round, I have him going Spencer Brown, offensive tackle out of Northern Iowa. Continue to invest in this offensive line after losing some other talented pieces. Villanueva still on the market. I think you get a guy like Spencer Brown. And, even if Banner and Chooks Okafor are the tackles for this team, you still have to keep in Spencer Brown and look at an option that could be a long-term starter. I'm not sure if Banner is that guy. So getting a guy like Brown, I think, would be an absolutely huge addition. In the third round, you look at Trey Sermon, running back for Ohio State, one that is very physical, one that is productive, and one that I think is a better athlete than both Benny Snell and James Conner. So if you get a guy that kind of fits that mold, the aggressive runner, north and south type guy that can really be physical and really plow forward through the offensive line, that sort of mantra of the Steelers dynasty in terms of how they've ran the ball in their past. Trey Sermon is an excellent fit. A lot of people have talked about Najee Harris in the first round, and I don't hate the pick in terms of talent, but I think in terms of need, they have bigger issues than to get a running back in the first round. They don't have that luxury right now, and that is why I have them waiting until the third to draft Sermon. In the fourth round, Kieris Tonga, whether or not you look at this defensive line, you think nose tackle is solved right now, I think long-term it is still very much a need. Getting Tonga in there, hopefully having him as a rotational piece that may be able to step in and become the starter long-term would be absolutely huge for this team, and I think it would be absolutely huge for Tonga because that is an excellent fit, especially working in between Cam Hayward and Stephon Tuitt. With the next fourth-round pick, I have him taking Josh Imatorbhebhe. You look at what he can do as an athlete and what the Steelers can do in terms of developing receivers, and it's a perfect fit. I think in terms of what he did at Illinois, he was phenomenal, and the offense just wasn't up to standards. Brandon Peters is a fine college QB, but there were too many times where he was missing on throws, and really it cost Imatorbhebhe probably money in this draft because even though he's a phenomenal athlete, I think there's a lot of polish on tape too. He can run pretty well, he gets separation, and he has great size. Put him in a place like Pittsburgh where they take athletes and turn them into stud receivers, and Josh Imatorbhebhe may be one of the biggest steals in this class. In the sixth round, I look at Grant Stewart, linebacker out of Houston. While this guy probably isn't going to be this all-star, superstar linebacker, I think he's definitely going to contribute as a run stuffer. I think he's going to be a special teams specialist, and he's going to add great depth to this linebacker unit that probably needs some help. Adding in Stewart with a unit that has Bush and Vince Williams right now as the starters, I think gets you that third linebacker, maybe fourth if necessary. And then you have to really see what he does in terms of growth. I think this is someone that, from the same school, Landon Roberts, is someone that he could really look up to being. And I think that'd be a nice third piece in any linebacker unit across the NFL. In the seventh round, I have him going Marco Wilson, cornerback out of Florida, and offensive guard Jared Hawker out of Texas A&M. Most likely these guys aren't going to start, but you look at what they bring to the table, and there's enough to really be enticed by them. Marco Wilson obviously is notoriously known for his shoe toss in the LSU game that really cost them that game, but that doesn't mean that he doesn't have some talent. There's still a lot there to work with. And, taking these guys in that seventh round and seeing what you can do with them, I think is absolutely worth it. Hawker, I think, is a good depth offensive lineman piece and potentially could step in and be a starter if anyone were to go down or need replaced. Nick, in terms of Steelers and their outlook going forward, what do you think of this draft in terms of just addressing needs?
Well, first of all, what are the chances that in his first game or his first report to the camp or something, there's going to be a cleat hanging in his locker? That's going to be some rookie hazing right there. The Steelers, I think they obviously need a center with Pouncey gone. I'm not really as high on Dickerson as you are, but it's slim pickings for the centers each year. There's usually not that many. They need a run stopper, so I think Tonga could definitely come in and contribute right away. At least being their rotation on the defensive line. Big guy, and he plugs the middle there, and he can get to the quarterback a little bit too. I think he had like 7 or 8 career sacks and 4-year player with BYU. He started since he was a freshman, so he's durable. He plays all the games, and he does what you need to do out there in the middle of the field.
Absolutely. And, just looking at it from a perspective of Steelers outlook, we don't have graphics anymore because these mock off seasons have come to a close. So we're going to talk about, what we expect for the Steelers next year. They definitely have suffered some losses. They've had some guys that are now no longer with the team, and they've taken some, regression in terms of how they started last year, in terms of how they finished. But for your expectations for the Steelers, what would you predict for their finishing? And do you think that the potential improvement of the AFC North is going to kind of put a sour on the Steelers season?
I think they'll be a wild card team. I think this might be the year where the Browns win the division. Ravens are right there still. I'm not going to read too much into the way the season ended last year for the Steelers. I think they still have the talent there. Juju Smith-Schuster, he was not playing hard at the end of last year. He probably thought, I'm going to get paid no matter what. Now he's only getting paid 1 year, $8 million. So he's going to try, hopefully be more motivated for Big Ben here and have a big season. And this could potentially be the last season for Ben Roethlisberger. So we'll see what happens here. Another year of Chase Claypool is good for the Steelers offense. And defensively, they'll just have to, hunker down and get things together here. And hopefully there could be some consistent offense from Mike Tomlin's Steelers. But I definitely see them as a wild card team at worst here for next season.
See, surprisingly, I'm sold on the Steelers just missing playoffs. I think that they've just taken too many hits. The roster already fell off, and I understand, maybe it was just a motivation issue and they could easily bounce back. I think in terms of competitiveness, though, there were too many games where they came out flat. Even when they were winning, they just had games where they weren't matching up with what a undefeated team really should be. So in this next year where I expect the AFC North to improve, I expect the schedule to be a little bit harder in terms of what they draw. I don't know. I don't trust the Steelers to be good next year. And I think with all the losses they take, the defense should be good, but I don't trust the offense to be very efficient. And in turn, maybe the defense loses some momentum as the season goes along with no offensive support.
We'll see. Well, you shall see. So while we're talking, I was going to say who do you think is going to win the division, but we can get to that a little later on.
Yeah, absolutely. And, a team that's definitely going to be competing with the Steelers is the Cleveland Browns, another team that made playoffs last year. We'll bring up their mock draft now. In the first round, I have them going Greg Newsome, cornerback out of Northwestern. After a phenomenal pro day, I think he has pretty much locked himself into being an early second-round pick at the latest. With that first-round pick for the Cleveland Browns, I think they can address corner and get a stud. Having Newsome, Ward, Troy Hill, and Greedy Williams as your cornerback unit would be absolutely phenomenal for the Cleveland Browns after last year where they struggled with injuries, where they struggled with having, guys that they could depend on. This time now, they get studs in the secondary, and I think it will be a phenomenal cornerback unit, especially with the safety help that's added in with Grant Delpit back from injury and John Johnson signing in free agency. Plus, you can't dismiss Ronnie Harrison either. Just an absolutely improved secondary if they get someone in this draft. With their second-round pick, I have them going Patrick Jones II out of Pittsburgh. I think you need someone opposite of Myles Garrett. They could look for someone in free agency, but I think getting someone like Patrick Jones II in this draft would be absolutely huge. He's a great run stuffer. You can kind of use him in containment scenarios where you let Myles Garrett really rush the passer fully. And with that, I think you have improved this defense entirely. Yes, the linebacker unit still has its holes, but I think you're seeing some really stud pieces in this draft that will allow the defense to really take that next step. In the third round, I have him going Nick Bolton, linebacker out of Missouri. I think what the biggest issue with Bolton is that he's not the greatest athlete, but he does have nice closing speed. He's a great run stuffer and a great tackler. I think, looking at guys like BJ Goodson, they kind of have that similar type of makeup. So you get a guy like Nick Bolton, who's going to be a cheap third-round deal, and you have a productive, probably dependable starter. Yes, you need some athletes, but I think with the secondary, with guys like Ronnie Harrison able to drop down and help out, you are able to sacrifice a little bit of athleticism for football IQ and really just run stuffing ability. With that next third-round pick, getting Bobby Brown the third, one of my favorites in this class, defensive lineman out of Texas A&M, probably best suited to play nose tackle. I think he's athletic enough to play 3-tech if needed. In that 4-3 defense, working, whether it's next to Sheldon Richardson or some of the other defensive linemen that they have, I think this would be an absolutely perfect pick. Get a guy that can stuff the run, rush the pass, be an interior menace, and that is what Bobby Brown is. For the Browns, they need some defensive help. That's why I had them go 4 straight picks of defensive players. With the fourth round, I have him going Trey Hill. he's a center out of Georgia, but I think he's best suited to play guard. You look at what Wyatt Teller is for the Browns, and he's a phenomenal lineman, but can you pay him? I'm not sure. I think the Browns are going to have some cap issues where they have to start looking for potential replacements in the future. Getting a guy like Trey Hill to potentially be that right guard and replace Wyatt Teller after he leaves in free agency would be an absolutely huge signing. And I think it could be great for the Browns to keep some of this roster cheap and really allow for themselves to build a phenomenal roster while not sacrificing, giving up a lot of money and a lot of picks for it. In that next fourth round, we're kind of keeping that same message. The Browns have some wide receiver decisions to make in the future. Rashard Higgins, Jarvis Landry, even Odell Beckham Jr. They need to add some talent to the room because most likely one of those pieces are going to be gone, potentially more. So getting a guy like Cornell Powell, who I think would be a phenomenal third wide receiver on this team, would probably step in as a fourth or fifth wide receiver on day one. I think he can provide depth, provide reliable hands, the ability to win deep, the ability to win in short to intermediate routes. I think he's one of the most well-rounded wide receivers in this class, and adding him to this offense to potentially become a contributor down the line, I think would be absolutely a phenomenal pick for the Browns. In the fifth round, Jonathan Cooper, edge rusher out of Ohio State. Again, Patrick Jones will most likely be that guy for them, and I really love Jones. But adding another piece to where you can rotate, keep everyone fresh, and getting a guy with as much upside as Cooper makes this a win in both situations. You get to address a need, you get upside in the fifth round on a day 3 pick, and really what you can do with this defense, adding a guy like Cooper, getting 3 dependable defensive ends, if all 3 really work out, then that's absolutely huge for the Browns and absolutely huge for this defense in terms of energy and in terms of efficiency. In the 6th round, I look at William Sherman. I think Chris Hubbard is gone after this year, so you look for a swing tackle. And I think Sherman has that ability. He's athletic, and in my opinion, he's very underrated. He's one of my favorite sleeper tackles in this class. And for the University of Colorado, he was an absolute stud. If the Browns can look at a tackle late and hit for someone to be that depth swing tackle, that's absolutely huge, so they don't have to spend money at the position. And in the 7th round, I have him going Joshua Bloodsow, a safety out of Missouri. Played free safety, but most likely suited to play strong safety in the NFL. Maybe, after this Johnson pick, they keep him at that free safety spot, especially with guys like Sheldrick Redwine also playing free safety. But I think this is more of a depth, potential special teams option that may stick around on the practice squad for a bit, and then they see what they can make out of him. Nick, in terms of outlook for the Browns, addressing the defensive side is obviously huge, but what do you think of this draft particularly, and what do you think of the Browns' outlook after a draft like this?
So I'm guessing they're not going to bring back Olivier Vernon, which is a little bit of a head scratcher. Guy had like nine sacks last year. I haven't heard anything about him signing it anywhere at all. So maybe he's going to retire. Have you heard anything on Olivier Vernon?
I haven't heard much. I know that there were some issues in terms of just like maybe not production, but just overall like efficiency that have kind of made question marks about whether he'll be back or not. But yeah, I haven't heard much in terms of what he's planning to do.
Yeah, so I mean, solid draft here. Getting an edge rusher, a linebacker, and a defensive lineman in the 2nd and 3rd rounds to really bolster that front 7 is big time because the Browns that sometimes last year had some issues getting to the quarterback outside of Vernon and Garrett. They're not that far off here. Stefanski did a great job last year. Offensively, they are very solid. They had the great running attack, and you mentioned Landry and Odell Beckham Jr. So I'm expecting another good season for the Cleveland Browns here.
Absolutely, and in terms of needs for this team and what they bring to the table, what do you think of the Browns for heading into the season? If they were to have a draft like that or whatever they do in the draft, what are your expectations for them? And do you think that it's win the division or it's a disappointment of a season for them?
Yeah, I think they definitely they want to win the division, but I think if they aren't in the AFC championship game this year, then I think a lot of people are going to be disappointed. So that's not an easy task, but if you win the division, you're much closer to doing that than anything else, because you look at the AFC East, the Bills I think are still the top team, but going to chalk up a few more wins there for the Patriots. So if the Browns could separate themselves from the Ravens and the Steelers, which I think they have, and they could, get up there at 12, 13 wins, they could be, that top seeded team in the opening weekend, and that'll help them big time moving forward here, and they could avoid playing the Chiefs in the before the conference championship. So the Browns last year, they put up a heck of a fight, but just came a little short. They're going to be a dangerous team again next year.
And one of the big things that's starting to be talked about is the looming extension for Baker Mayfield. Some people have come forward and said, I don't think the Browns should pay them. I think there's kind of this running offense that works, but Mayfield's just kind of sitting in that role. Do you buy into that at all, or do you think they need to pay Mayfield and keep him there in Cleveland?
Listen, I don't think Mayfield should be getting like this crazy money like Dak Prescott, who I also don't think should be getting that crazy money, but that's just the way it's going these days. Is it going to hurt this team to have so much money in Baker Mayfield? Absolutely. But, what's the alternative? That's what you got to ask yourself. And they waited so long just to be a competitive team and get in the playoffs, which is what Baker Mayfield has done for them. You have to reward the guy. This fan base has been tortured, and if they let Mayfield go and then they're just bringing in Cam Newton or something, people will not be happy.
Absolutely. And another team that is going to have to look into extending their QB, the Baltimore Ravens. Another possible issue for them is the looming Orlando Brown situation. Wants to play left tackle, would be right tackle if he came back. Here's the trade that we have. Baltimore sends Orlando Brown, their first and second, pick 27 and 58, to the Los Angeles Chargers for their 13th and 47th pick. So what this is a pick swap in the first, a pick swap in a second, and allows them to move up, and in turn they give Orlando Brown to the Chargers, who desperately need a left tackle to help protect Justin Herbert. So what the Ravens do from there, in the first round at pick 13, I have them going Devonta Smith. After looking at it from a free agency perspective, I think this wide receiver board is starting to move around. Maybe they go Jamar Chase if he's there, and I think that's one of the best fits in the here at 13. Add him in. I think, yes, the big question mark is, are you really going to have a wide receiver core of Hollywood Brown and Devonta Smith? That might be, 200 pounds combined between both of them. But Devonta Smith is an absolute monster on film. Adding him in to get a wide receiver who has polish, who can get open, and who can make plays for Lamar Jackson would be absolutely huge. And trading up while you lose Orlando Brown would be a great move for the Ravens to add a wide receiver weapon in this class. In the second round, I have them getting Tevin Jenkins, and there is the Orlando Brown replacement, a phenomenal run blocker, and really just a mover. We saw him go against Joseph Osai in the middle of the season, and really they went at it all game. Knife sharpens knife, sword sharpens sword, whatever you want to call it. These are two phenomenal prospects that went at it all game, and Tevin Jenkins really proved that he is worth the hype. In the second round, mid to early second, I think this is a perfect pick to step in on this offensive line and keep Lamar protected. In the third round, I have him going Kelvin Joseph, corner out of Kentucky. I think this is someone that's gotten a little bit of hype from the media that's been, rising up on the mock draft boards, but I don't expect it to be the same on draft day. I think he's going to be a, maybe late second to late third type guy. And with the Ravens, the cornerback unit has been the recipe for success. They've had not only Marcus Peters, but Marlon Humphrey, not only Marlon Humphrey, but Jimmy Smith, and, many others in that mix. But after time, you're going to have to make sacrifices, and getting a guy like Kelvin Joseph to step in for, maybe Jimmy Smith, who's nearing the end of his career, would be absolutely huge for the Ravens and would add some talent to this unit that can continue that success and allow them to continue to thrive with a dominant secondary. In the fourth round, I have them going Victor Dimukeje. You look at what the Ravens do with their edge rushers, and they are great at developing. They are great at having versatile options. And I think that's what Demukaje does. He kind of reminds me of Anfernee Jennings last year, the solid, compact frame, but I think there's athleticism and agility to drop back into coverage. And I think that's what the Ravens would be able to do with him. And with his youth, he's one of the youngest prospects in this class. I think he would be able to be a stud in time with the Ravens and be developed into a proper starter. Probably starts right away, if not in that year 2 situation, because of the Ravens' loss of Matthew Judon. But a guy like Demukaje in 4th round, I think would be a great pick. With the next 4th round pick, Ryan McCollum, center out of Texas A&M. You look at what the Ravens have really gone through in terms of interior offensive line over the years, and there's just been issues nonstop of, missed snaps, allowed pressure, broken pockets. And while Lamar Jackson has the athleticism to scramble around and make do with some bad offensive line play on the inside, that doesn't mean you just want it to continue to happen. Get a guy like McCollum in the 4th round. Potentially he could come in and step in as a starter, and I think you're getting a much more dependable center in place. And you're also getting a very good run blocker. I think he's proven himself to be a dependable blocker at the college level, and at the NFL level, I think that would continue. In the 6th round, I have him double dipping at the defensive line spot. 2 guys that played nose tackle in college, but one is definitely not meant to be, and that's why I am kind of high on him. Naquan Jones is the nose tackle for Michigan State. This guy actually fits the mold of a nose tackle. He's 340, absolute beast, and really can step that nose tackle that the Ravens will hopefully find a replacement for Brandon Williams, who's nearing the end of his career, but they need someone to really step in because when he's gone, it shows for the Ravens defense. And then Carlo Kemp is someone that plays nose tackle for Michigan, but he's like 290 pounds. He should not be playing nose tackle at all, but he holds up. And, that speaks volumes to me. When you're playing out of position and still looking like a talented player, a lot of people don't get credit enough for that, but Carlo Kemp gets all the credit in the world to me. If you put him at 5 tech, 3 tech, I think he's going to really pop off. So look for Carlo Kemp to be someone that goes in that 3rd day, maybe even UDFA, I'm not sure, but really finds himself a home around the NFL and really makes a name for himself after some time. Nick, in terms of this draft and in terms of what the Ravens' needs are and what the big question marks are for this next season, what do you think of it? And what do you think of, the potential Devonta Smith option being added to the Ravens wide receiver room?
Well, it seems Devonta Smith just keeps falling in these mock drafts. Some people had him going top 10, then 12, and now he's falling down here. People, it seems like everyone's got him as the 3rd wide receiver at this point. And where do you have him as your wide receiver rankings?
Yeah, he's my wide receiver 3. Absolutely love him though. I'm really high on all 3 wide receivers, but the biggest issue is just trying to find a landing spot in this draft where they can go for a wide receiver right now, because there's usually the teams that need wide receiver most seem to have much bigger needs that they should address early.
Right. Where do you have Kyle Pitts going? Because I think he'd be a really strong fit here in the Lamar Jackson offense. I'm assuming you have him in the top 10.
Yeah, I think the most rumored landing spot seems to be Atlanta and Philadelphia. I'm not sure that I see Atlanta picking them, but I could see Philadelphia kind of going with Kyle Pitts, creating that Goddard Pitts 2 tight end look and really trying to flourish with that.
By the way, Kyle Pitts ran a 4.46 today in his 40-yard dash. You read too much into those 40-yard dash times, Michael, or are you all about them?
I don't read too much into them. It's good to have a solid 40, and if you have a terrible 40, I'll read into it. But if you're just kind of, slow on tape or stiff on tape, but you're able to run fast, it's not going to tell me a lot. So you got to be able to, put together a good 40, but also have good film to couple with it if you want me to really buy into it as much.
Certainly. And the Ravens, I think a big need for them, as long as they're going to have Lamar Jackson as their quarterback, needs to the offensive line. You saw him get injured last year, really more so the COVID. But then, Robert Griffin comes in, he gets hurt right away. So they addressed that with Kevin Zeitler, big signing, probably one of the best linemen that was a free agent here. And, when you have that type of quarterback, it's never bad to go with the offensive lineman in the draft.
Absolutely. And, we look at what the Ravens bring to the table for this year, and I think there's a lot to be excited about. Lamar Jackson gets another year of development. You look at the running back room, J.K. Dobbins put together an excellent end of the season. And if you're anyone who's into fantasy, I think he's someone that you should definitely look for in your drafts or, potentially trades if you're in some dynasty or keeper league. But the big issue has been wide receiver for this team. And yeah, you can fault Lamar for maybe not being as efficient as a passer as he could have been, but there's still a huge, holding back, a huge thing to overcome when you don't have wide receivers that can separate. Hollywood Brown is one of the fastest wide receivers in the league, but he couldn't find a way to separate, and there's just Miles Boykin is like your wide receiver too. And he's big and fast, but he can't separate. And then Devin Duvernay looks solid as a rookie, but you still need that developed play. And last year they just weren't good at the wide receiver room, and it holds back a QB. And for Lamar Jackson, when you're young, you need weapons to be able to fall back on because that's huge for development and huge for confidence. So getting him a weapon is absolutely a necessity. And it seems the Ravens know that. They've been looking into the veteran free agent market at wide receiver, pursuing a guy like Juju, pursuing other options as well. It wouldn't surprise me at all if, even with an Orlando Brown trade where maybe they get up to 13, they try to move up again to try to get a guy like Jamar Chase. Because I think in terms of draft fit, Jamar Chase to the Ravens would be one of the most beautiful things in all of the NFL.
I think the Ravens end up with Golden Tate. Sign him, and he'll make some big plays for the Ravens.
I think he could definitely contribute to the room, that's for sure. And, let's talk about this NFC North, though. Or AFC North, sorry. We talked about the Steelers, the Browns, and the Ravens today. Sadly, we've already done the Bengals a while back. But there's a lot to, really be entertained about with this entire division. Joe Burrow in year 2 potentially makes that next step and could potentially take that Bengals team to the next level. The Steelers obviously started out the season as one of the best teams in the NFL, fell off a bit, but they're still an elite defense, and there's a lot to love. The Ravens have been consistently dominant and hanging around in the NFL for a long time. They very much are still in play to win the AFC North, and the Browns had that huge breakout season last year where they finally made playoffs. They could continue growing under Stefanski with one of the best running back rooms in the NFL. Baker Mayfield, obviously another year of development, and really just an improved defense could make this AFC North the best division in football. Nick, in terms of just predictions for it, if you had to rank them 1 through 4, what are your expectations for the AFC North? And, what are your division?
Yeah, so cut out a little there, but I think the Browns are going to win the division. I guess the thing is we're still trying to figure out if there's going to be a 17-game season or a 16-game season. It looks like it's going to be 17, but we don't really know yet. So these teams are going to beat each other up at the top here. So I'm going to say the Browns win the division at 12-5 in a 17-game season. I think that the Ravens and Steelers will both have 10 wins, and the Bengals are going to have some trouble. Again, I don't see that the Bengals are doing enough to help Joe Burrow here. And just the team in general. Geno Atkins, they cut him to save some cap space, but I don't see where this team's going to be good enough, to win that many games here and protect Joe Burrow. It's going to be really tough for the Bengals. But yeah, just to recap, the Browns will have winning the division. Ravens and Steelers, right there, because I have the Steelers in the playoffs and then the Bengals there at the end. Yes, the NFLPA accepted a 17-game season, Rick, but they haven't decided yet if this season with COVID they're going to start it this year or wait till next year with the new, CBA when it actually starts. And the separation is a weird stat. Lamar is struggling to grow as a thrower, but it does not help that they run the triple tight end offense. Yeah, I mean, they have a tight end heavy offense there. That's why I mentioned Kyle Pitts, but they do need to get that big wide out who could go down the field. We really don't know about Lamar Jackson's deep ball. We never really see him throw the ball deep. It's more so that the triple tight end offense is really to protect Lamar Jackson when he's doing the play action.
Yeah, and there's definitely questions about this entire division that, like Lamar has his questions in terms of can that offense take the next step in terms of efficiency? And the Browns are going to have that question of can they fix up the defense? The Steelers are going to have the question of can that offense really recover from what was a terrible rut to end the season? And, the Bengals are going to have that question of can the entire roster really take that next step together? And for me, I think I'm similar with you. I think the Browns win the division because I think right now in a season like this, with the development that they've had, winning the division matters most to them. I'm not going to say the Ravens don't care about it or anything, but I just think the Browns are going to be probably the most motivated to go out and win, and I think they're talented enough to do it. Second place, I think you look at the Ravens right there, and then, I'm Steelers, Bengals, but I don't think Steelers or Bengals make playoffs. So I think, you're looking at 13-4, 12-5 for the Browns, and then 12-5, 11-6 for the Ravens. And I think both those teams are going to be very strong, and it really just depends on how we finish out this offseason to potentially change that.
Well, we will see. We're getting closer here. And, the draft is coming up, so now we'll be getting a bunch of these pro days, Michael. What are you looking for specifically from some people you're trying to figure out where to put them in your mock draft right now when it comes to pro days?
Yeah, so one huge question mark that I had was about Nick Bolton, and he today tested for the Missouri Pro Day and really kind of showed a lot of what we saw on tape is that, he's a smart player, he's a good run stuffer, he works downhill well, but in terms of athleticism, it's just not there. And that's going to limit him, and that's probably going to push him down. I've seen a lot of mocks that will include him in the first round, and I don't think that's realistic. I think third round is probably his peak, and I don't want to be rude about it. I just think, third round to fifth round is a much more realistic range for Nick Bolton. I think he's a fine linebacker, but you kind of know what he is, and a lot of teams are probably going to be more enticed by people they think they can develop. So I look for maybe a guy like Jamin Davis out of Kentucky that will maybe not have the same notoriety at the college football level, but still have, the length, the athleticism, and the potential to grow from his frame to become a special linebacker, to go higher than a guy like Bolton, despite maybe Bolton being higher on a lot of media boards right now. And then, you look at some of the wide receivers and corners. I think that's where the big situation comes from. A guy like Paris Ford just ran a 4.9 40, and he was a guy that was rumored to be a third round pick at the highest. But now I don't know if he's going to get drafted. That's really how much some of the stuff matters. If you turn in an athletic testing that is abysmal, you lose faith of a lot of the guys that were writing for you. Right. And if you're in a war room saying, this is our guy, this is someone that we need to look at, and then they turn in this pro day, you're probably saying, okay, maybe I misevaluated. I'm all right passing over him. And then, instead of you pounding the table for Paris Ford in the fourth round, you're now looking at him in the seventh maybe, but you still have guys that have been pounding for, these FCS players maybe, or a lower end Division I guy that they've been pounding the table the entire offseason for about, hey, this is a guy that we should look at in that 6th, 7th round because I think he's going to be an absolute stud. So when you start to lose momentum on players, that's when you start to really lose the chance of drafting them. And when these athletic testing numbers come out, a lot of scouts aren't going to want to put their name and their entire reputation on a guy that really doesn't fit any of the athletic standards of the position. So you look at a guy like Paris Ford, and that's why he may fall from being a projected second, third round pick to undrafted now. And I hope that, it's just a bad day and he gets drafted and he does well in the league. But these pro days matter. And
Yeah,
you know, if
know.
we're going to put up good numbers, just pretend to have a hamstring issue or something. I don't know.
They matter more because there's no combine. So it's kind of like this is it. This is the last time the team's going to see you.
Absolutely. And, you know, I just want to give a quick shout out to some great performances today from Chauncey Golston and Amir Smith-Marset at the Iowa Pro Day. Amir Smith-Marset is probably my wide receiver 6, wide receiver 7. I'm a lot higher on him compared to the consensus. I think he is someone that reminds me a lot of Emmanuel Sanders, where he can play outside, play inside, ran a 4.46, put up some good numbers in terms of agility, has the frame, has the separation and route polish that I think is going to get him some early success despite maybe not being as high in the draft. That's all we have for you today on Destination Draft Day. Thank you to everyone in the comment sections, mostly just Ricklington. Thank you to LandryFootball.com for the platform. And thank you to everyone that tuned in to watch. We will see you guys on Friday. Take care.